to the Chicago Public Library virtual program, Environmental Justice in Chicago, a panel discussion. This program is in conjunction with the exhibit From Swamps to Parks, Building Chicago's Public Spaces at Harold Washington Library Center, as well as the exhibit Hazel Johnson, Mother of Environmental Justice at Woodson Regional Library. My name is Chloe. I'm a librarian at Chicago Public Library, and I will be moderating the discussion. For our attendees, please use the Q&A feature on Zoom to ask questions to our speakers, or you can use the chat. We will answer some of those questions at the end if we have time. Tonight, we welcome 3 organizers from across the city. Cheryl Johnson is the Executive Director of People for Community Recovery, founded in 1979 by her mother to address urban environmental pollution in their neighborhood of Altgeld Gardens. Peggy Salazar is a lifelong resident of Chicago's Southeast Side and has been involved in the environmental justice issues in her community her entire adult life. She has been the director of the Southeast Environmental Task Force since 2010. Jacqueline Vasquez is the park organizer at the Little Village Environmental Justice Organization. She was born in New Jersey but raised in Little Village. Jackie began volunteering for LVEJO and worked her way up, becoming part of the staff in 2018. So thank you all for being here, and let's get started. I'm wondering if we can start off, if our panelists can start off telling us a little about their organizations and their work. And since I started with Cheryl for the bios, I think I'll start with her for this question. Cheryl?
Hi. Thank you, Chloe. And thank you guys for this discussion for tonight. My name is Cheryl Johnson, and I'm the Executive Director of People for Community Recovery. Is a community-based environmental justice organization located in public housing, particularly Altgeld Gardens on the south side of Chicago. Our organization was founded June of 1979 and became incorporated as an organization October 25th, 1982. We started off as an organization addressing industrial pollution in our area, because my mother famously named our community area the Toxic Donut. We're like in the center of the donut, and outside the parameter is different environmental industries in our area, particularly 50 documented landfill. They said 250 leaking underground storage tanks, and over 300 and something hazardous waste sites that surround our area. So she labeled our community Toxic Donut. So as our organization been involved with advocacy as far as compliance issues with some of the industries in our area, but we also felt the need to be able to train residents, and many of the environmental opportunity also was in the pipeline. We was able to train over nearly 500 residents in the area in lead, asbestos, underground storage tank, air monitoring. So those are a few of the trainings we used to offer in the community. But we also looking at green sustainable solutions for our community, such as advocating for here in public housing for the Chicago Housing Authority to build a solar farm in our community to reduce some of the energy burden in the area. We also work on many other issues, water quality issues in the city of Chicago. We work on tenants' rights related issues in the city of Chicago. So we really are multi-purpose, community-based environmental, we are multi-purpose environmental organization. We look at everything that we do through the lens of environmental justice, and to make sure that it's fair practices and equity happens for our area. So I can turn it over to Peggy.
Have have to unmute myself as usual. Good evening, everybody. My name is Peggy Salazar, and I am with the Southeast Environmental Task Force. And our organization actually started with our founder, Marion Burns, who in 1979 heard that they were going to build a CTA bus barn behind her house in a huge 130-acre prairie. And she was determined to stop that because she knew once the bus barn was built, it would destroy the wetlands that were there and the animal and wildlife habitat. So she organized people in her community.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, Peggy. Could you turn on your camera for a second?
I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I had to turn it on. Sorry about that. So she organized the community, and she was able to prevent the CTA bus barn from being built on that particular site. And that site today is the site of the Marion Burns Natural Area, which is now in the hands of the Park District of Chicago and is undergoing some restoration work as we speak. So she was very successful in that. And then in 1989, she formed what was known then as the Southeast Environmental Task Force, whose purpose was actually to fight the construction of a garbage incinerator on the old Wisconsin Steel site. So for people who aren't familiar with the southeast side of Chicago, we were once the hub of the steelmaking industry. So that's the reason we had so much vacant land, because once the steel industry shuttered its doors, we were left with acres and acres of brownfields. And so she went to bat along with other organizations that she convened in a coalition to fight off the incinerator, and she was successful there. And that's how the task force got started. And so our mission since then has been open space preservation, pollution prevention, as well as sustainable development. And that's what we've been working on. So we advocate for clean and green development because we have so much dirty industry here within the 10th Ward. And once again, it's because some of it already existed and because it was easy to place things here on contaminated property because it was felt that what's a little more contamination, what's a little more pollution. And so we've been working very hard to change that because I always thought that once the steel mills were gone, that we would have a brighter future, that we'd be able to transform into a different type of community, and that didn't happen. And so that's what we're working toward, and that's where we are right now, and we continue to work toward that goal. And we won't stop until we get what we feel is fair and equitable development here on the southeast side of Chicago. And instead of being the recipient of all this dirty industry to accommodate the development of other areas, we want some development and revitalization for our community. So I'll turn it over to Jackie.
Thank you for that. My name's Jackie. I'm the park organizer for Alvejo. Alvejo has been around for about 25 years. They started off by a group of parents from Gary Elementary. And the way that they started was because the school was going under renovations. They were retiring their roof. And because of this, parents noticed that their kids were like getting sick, they were getting headaches, nausea, they were going through that, and because of tar, it was one of the main causes for the students to be affected, and so parents demanded CPS to postpone the retiring of the roof in order to keep the kids safe. And from this, it ended up like the group of parents and along with like other folks, they gathered together in little village to ask around. They created surveys, maps to identify some of the areas where they wanted to focus on, and so they identified the Crawford Coal Power Plant, the Silotech site, and the 31st Street CTA bus line as important environmental justice struggles. Like for us, like that was really important as we believe that us as a community, we have the solutions to solve our own problems, and with that, we were like lucky enough to shut down the Crawford Coal Power Plant. We were able to remediate the Silotech site. We were able to get the 31st Street bus back in place. But still, like the struggle continues.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And Peggy and Cheryl, you can turn your cameras on. I'm sorry if that was confusing, my fault. So our next question, I know this was mentioned a little bit previously, but if you could please speak on what is exactly environmental justice work in general or to you? And Peggy, why don't you start with this one? Peggy, if you could unmute, please.
I'll never get used to this. I can give you the short definition, which is that environmental justice focuses on the fair distribution of environmental benefits and burdens. So what that translates into, no community should have only negative environmental impacts because of where they are sited or where they live or what their income is. Again, this is the situation in our community. We feel like all of the dirty industry has been concentrated here. And so we're looking for a more fair approach to how these things are done in the city of Chicago. And it's all because of the land use and the policies that are in place. And so once again, we were a community of contaminated acres, and they just felt like it was an easy thing to do to continue putting an industry here that was dirty, because to clean up and restore the land would be so expensive that they were looking for easy solutions. And they really felt like we were a community that was pretty much voiceless. And for many years we were. And I think it's taken this long for us to wake up and say, wait a minute, you know, what is going on here? And we no longer want to be victims. We don't want to be marginalized, and we don't want to be sacrificed for the benefit of others. And so this is where we are.
I guess I would have to concur with Peggy said, but I just want to add a little bit that environmental justice also challenged the systemic racism that many communities experience. So it's about regulations and enforcement that has played a big part in the city failure to respond to communities, the community voice when they have incidents in their own community. The response time, like in my community, I can go back as far as 1974 when we had our first explosion out here. We was the last to be notified. We was the last to be evacuated. And then in 1979, in 1986, we had another spill in our neighborhood. Again, we was last to be notified, last to be evacuated. So it's the practices that the government plays on people of low socioeconomics. And the fact that the city of Chicago knew when it first built Allgale Garden, it was built on a sludge landfill from the operation from the George M. Pullman making the railroad cars back in the 1800s. So the city knew that the land was contaminated, but they also had a need to build affordable housing for returning World War II veterans, particularly the Black families. And that's how Allgale became one of the first 4 public housing that was built. But you cannot look at environmental justice just from a justice lens because you got to understand the racism that has been plagued on a community like mine and others on the south and west side of Chicago. So it's the unfair treatment of government responses to remediate or to educate or to even make people aware that they are living in a community with environmental harms. Jackie, you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you. Like a lot like with Peggy and Cheryl, like I believe in all that myself, and um I guide myself through the principles of environmental justice, just like Cheryl touched on. Um I I just like that the principles address that there was colonization and oppression, and that's the reason for why many of our communities have been polluted and like harmed. Um, and like for me, environmental justice just touches on every aspect. You can't just talk about EJ and not talk about racism. You can't talk about EJ and not talk about the like social economics. Like it just touches base on everything. And I'm like no expert on all these topics either, but like I'm like growing within everything. Like I'm learning from a lot of folks. I'm learning about how like environmental justice and like also like working with anti-Black racism in my community, how that works all together for us to create like a safe space, um, providing resources for all folks, even fighting some of the social stigmas that there may be, like when it comes to like gangs or when it comes to drug use, and just thinking about how history has played a role on that and how we could continue supporting our communities, um supporting it and to becoming a healthy place, sustainable place for all of us.
Thank you. Our next question, well, we are here to celebrate an exhibit that we have going on at Chicago Public Library about the history of the parks. So I would love to know, how have the parks intersected with your environmental justice work? And Jackie, I'm actually going to turn it right back over to you because this is your expertise.
Thank you for that. So I'll just like kind of give a brief of like Little Village. So we are a large low-income immigrant community. Um, and before we had La Villita Park, we only had Petrosky Park, and it was only accessible to a third of the community. Uh, like going back to how I mentioned the 31st Street bus, it was important for us to like bring that back because there was like gang boundaries and because of the lack of public transit. Um, the like the folks who were on the east side of of Little Village, um, they weren't able to access La Villita Park in a safe manner. Um, And so initially the neighborhood wanted a park between like 31st Street and Central Park and Millard, but Ricardo Munoz sold the land to plastics recycling factory, MRC Polymers. Um and so after that we were looking at other super fun sites. And so we were looking at into 31st and Kedzie, but then it was identified that the air quality wasn't the greatest. Since it's closer to the I-55, and also there's just a lot of ongoing traffic in that intersection. And then we move along to the Silotech site. The Silotech site used to house roofing materials like tar. And like I mentioned earlier, tar can cause headaches, nausea, and other respiratory issues. And so with that, it was a 15-year long fight to obtain this spot, because not only were we trying to remediate the Silotech Superfund site, we were also trying to get the homes around the site to be remediated as well. Neighbors from the area who brought it to our attention at first, they mentioned that they were suffering from skin rashes from the water runoff from this site. Whenever it rained, it would go into their basements. And some of these people, like, they didn't know what the water had, so of course they got affected by it. But the neighborhood noticed, and they were not gonna accept that. And so they demanded for their homes to be remediated, to be clean, tested. And then with that, they're like, it would be nice if we have a park here. Turn something horrible to something beautiful. And so they started building the site, and the community members even brought the idea that they didn't want the contaminated soil to be dumped into another neighborhood, like, who could possibly be affected by this as well. And so the idea to cap it came. And so, like, if you ever visit La Villita Park, it's elevated. It's almost like 2 stories up. And it's capped with cement, different types of rocks, which I'm not really sure what they're all called, but I know it's like very capped. They're like, we're always like on the lookout in case like the cap pops or something, because we're still not sure. Like, it's still fairly new, and we're not sure if, like, how long the cap um can work and stuff. But so far we've been lucky. And so the park is a 22-acre park. The skate park was built by the community members, especially the skaters. People wanted basketball courts, football fields, baseball fields. We have a large playground. And something that, like, I just really appreciate is that even though it took 15 years to get this park, people are still like bussing through this park, and they want to see more. Which is very beautiful. Like, a lot of people say the park is still not finished because, one, we don't have a community center. And we say community center because that's something that they want instead of a field house. They want services provided. They want to help the community as much as possible. And that's all I'm sharing for now. And I'm not sure if Peggy or Cheryl wants to go next.
Go next, because this is one of the areas that we are actually very fortunate, I have to say, because we were a heavy industrial area, and the types of industries that were here took up acres and acres of space. So while it was a detriment to the community and polluting industry was here, there was a silver lining in that we had a lot of vacant land. So for an urban area to find thousands of acres of space, contiguous space, and some of that space having, natural amenities like wetlands, is really quite unusual. So we have that benefit. And right now we have at least 3,000 acres of open park space now. A lot of it isn't completed because it wasn't pristine. It wasn't pristine space. It was open space, and it was green and weedy, but it wasn't pristine. And so the Park District of Chicago is in the process now of actually restoring and remediating. And it's an interesting thing because some of the contamination could not be removed. So like Jackie was saying, they have to cap it in place. And what the park was doing in some cases is not so much restoring as rebuilding nature, which is an interesting concept. So it's kind of like capping and then putting nature on top as best that you can. And I think the important lesson for everybody who's on this call to learn is that we cannot continue to contaminate the planet, because you'll never, ever remediate it back to the way it was. And it's extremely costly and time consuming to do so. So we have been working on these parks since 2000. Okay, it takes time to gather funds. It takes time to do the work. They're still testing some approaches as we speak. They're using like phytoremediation. They're using cap in place. They're using, dig it out and haul it away. They're using all kinds of different approaches. But our main concern at this point in time is that even if they, offer these beautiful parks, and they are open. So I encourage anybody to come to the southeast side of Chicago and visit one of our marshes. We have Indian Ridge Marsh, Hegwish Marsh. We have Big Marsh. We have the only state forest preserve. We also have a county forest preserve. So there's Eggers and Williams. These are places you have to come see. But once again, our biggest complaint is that we also know we have some of the most contaminated air. We also know we have some of the stinkiest odors. We also know we have some of the most unsightly piles of things. And so even though the city tried to convince us that, and they said this, industry and nature could coexist, it's not true. It's not true. Because if you want to come and enjoy our beautiful green spaces, you don't want to do so being afraid of what you might be breathing, or not wanting to be, run over by a truck because we have so much truck traffic, or you don't want to come and feel like, am I safe in this area? Those are the things that, we're trying to work and make the city understand, that even though they may have believed that industry and nature could coexist, it's really not true. And people are also part of nature, let's face it. So right now we're working on that with the city of Chicago. If you want to be able to capitalize on these assets, you have to look at these industrial corridors through a different lens, and you have to start being more specific and careful and conscientious about what you're putting in them, because not every industry belongs in the backyards of residents and communities. And we keep saying this over and over. There's certain industries, like certain odors, you can't stop. Certain dust is one of the hardest things to control. So when you have piles of coal and pet coke and limestone and salt, try to stop that dust. Try to stop that. Okay. And so this is what we're saying now. We want to be able to capitalize on our assets. We want to make sure that people can come and enjoy our communities. We want our communities to do so. It can't be done with the situation as it exists now. We cannot be successful. Okay. And so this is where we're, again, working very hard to kind of get the city to change their attitude toward our communities and toward these natural spaces that they're investing so much money in. I will pass this on to Cheryl.
Cheryl, could you unmute, please?
Okay, I'm sorry. Thanks, Peggy. Allgale sits on 180 acres of land. In addition, in totality, it's about 240 acres when you include Forest Preserve, Jubian Woods. One of the things that I understand, that my community has always been a beautiful open space area where we connect with our Forest Preserve and also with our park district. Our field house is going to go under renovation probably sometime the end of this year. And that'll be the first major renovation that it have ever had. And we enjoy the openness in our area because it's so accessible and safe for people to walk, to ride their bikes and stuff. But there wasn't no amenities within our park. Like our park was just an open field with maybe with a baseball field on it. Today we got a playground on the field, and we also got a scoreboard that was just put up just 2 years ago. So, and with the renovation of our field house, that would improve the assets in our community. But what I love the most about my park is that we got an enclosed swimming pool that was open 20 all year round. I'm not 24. I was about to say 24 hours, but no, I wish. But it was open all year round. And what I loved about this pool, because it had a retractable roof, and it was only 2 parks in the city of Chicago that had a retractable roof, and that was our park. Our park and another park, I never knew where the other one were. But as you look at this swimming pool area within our park district, and it's unfortunately that's not going to be part of the renovation, because to my understanding, that in Allgale, our park, our field house is also shared with the Chicago Housing Authority. So it's always been conflict about who's responsible for what and what. So they finally came up with a decision to say within the park area, within the swimming pool area, that the ownership is Park District. So Park District still has the same cabinets, toilet when I was in there, when I was a little girl. I'm a swimmer. I learned how to swim in that swimming pool in my neighborhood. I became a junior lifeguard probably about like at 11, 12, 13 years old. And and it's unfortunate right now today, they have not allocated any money to fix up the locker room in the male fit, the showers, the toilets. And it's still the same antiquated material that was in there when I was a kid. The floor is deplorable. I don't see how people allow their kids to go in there. But again, the park district is not allocating any fund to renovate our lockers. And if they ever have spent money, I want to know where it went. So our organization, PCR, we serve on the Allgale Temporary Advisory Committee. So we try to monitor and be engaged with development that's happening in our community. We just got a $20 million built public library in our community, but due to the pandemic, it's not being accessible right now to use it in its full capacity. And what I love about my area, because we have so much open space in our area, there's a lot of plan. The Forest Preserve, Buben Wood, had got renovation plans to put picnic tables that never been out there before, to fix up the where you go dock your boat at. They already repaired that. We used to have 4, they took it down to 3, but it's beautiful. They paved the streets. So I see the great potentials, and even with the opportunity that the Chicago Transit Authority is going to extend the red line to 130. It opened up a great potential for revitalization in our area. So it's a great community. What I love about my community, we have a lot of wetlands in our area also, Peggy. But a lot of times we don't speak about the different species of birds that we have on the southeast side of Chicago. We probably have over 300 different species of birds in our area. Some people get excited when they see a bald eagle or something flying around our neighborhood. We used to it because we see it all the time. So the great access, the Little Calumet River may be one of the worst polluted rivers in this area, but it's highly utilized by people. People fish, people just use recreation or just go out there for serenity. It's a great isolated area that has been disinvested in and never, once built, I don't think they did any investment in my area. but because there's good people in the community that want to see this community stay here, we're hoping that these different projects that will revitalize our community, and I look forward to seeing our park totally renovated, including the swimming pool area.
Yeah, Chloe, I'd like to add to what Cheryl said about the wildlife. I definitely encourage people, if you're listening, to come to the southeast side of Chicago. You will see deer. Many times we see deer, across from our shopping mall. We see deer walking down the street now. We didn't see that 20 years ago, but I have a feeling it's because they are improving the green space here, and they're making it more supportive to wildlife, that we're seeing this abundance of deer. We see eagles, like Cheryl says, we see eagles, we see hawks, we see red-winged blackbirds, we see all kinds of white egrets. Now I know that people in the city of Chicago do not see white egrets sitting on their porch or their chimney or their roof or anything, but you will see them here. So again, I encourage people to come here. This is the kind of stuff we are in support of. We are trying to be very considerate of our wildlife. We want to offer them space. We want to offer them quality space. Space that's good for them is going to be good for us. And so this is what we're working and striving toward. The Park District, like I said, is doing, I believe, the best they can for the restoration, but they do fall short in our regular city parks on the southeast side also. Like Cheryl says, they don't invest in the equipment as often or as much. Right now, Calumet Park, which sits on Lake Michigan, is in an atrocious state along the lake shoreline. The pathways have been broken up by the action of the lake. There's going to take a lot of money to restore that area. We hope that the city will do that, because these are amenities to our community, and we need the Park District to continue to invest in the south side, just like they're investing in the north side. And also, we would like to see our rivers, as Cheryl said, we'd like them to be cleaned up. We want them to be healthy for everybody. We want them to be publicly accessible. Right now, our river, especially the little Calumet River, is being used as a working river. And so you'll see ships and barges and that kind of traffic, but you really don't see a lot of recreation on it because it wasn't meant for that type of usage. And so we're trying to change all that around. These are our assets. The southeast side lost tons of jobs when manufacturing and the steel industry shuttered. We need to gain some of those assets we have. We need to capitalize on them. And this is what we have. We have rivers and lakes and open space that no one else in the city of Chicago has. And this is where we have to put our money for development so that we can provide a better quality of life for our residents. And we want to offer the residents of Chicago, the citizens of Chicago, a place to come visit that's unique and natural and very different from anywhere else in the city.
Thank you so much. And as a bird watcher, I can attest to the white egrets. It's a beautiful, beautiful place to bird watch. My final question before we get to patrons' questions is, how can residents take action to make sure their own neighborhood and their families are safe? And anyone who wants to answer this can.
One of the most important things people need to understand is that we can't move in community based on aesthetics anymore. This is a beautiful house, beautiful yard, I want to live there. Now you have to really do your investigation and what was the prior land use? What was what type of industry is in my community? What type of stores is in my community? There's a lot of cleaners in my store? Because a lot of people don't understand cleaners contribute to some of the environmental quality because of the perchlorate chemicals that they use there. So one of the things that people need to do a general assessment of your community, because environmental issues, it touches everything. It touches the quality of your house. It touched the quality of the businesses in your community. It just it just intersect with so many everyday life situations that we deal with, even with transportation. Like the south side and the west side have so many desert areas. But we don't want to promote diesel fuels to be coming in our community. We want to electrify our transportation system so we can have better, cleaner air. So it's a people have to do their due diligence and find out what's going on in your neighborhood first. That's the very first must, and get involved. Just get involved. I think one of the greatest advantages that we have today is because what we're doing right now is having these Zoom meetings, and sometimes I be Zoom text, but it's okay because I learn a lot of information. I get the chance to engage and see a lot of people that I haven't seen before, or meet new friends, meet new people who are doing great things in their neighborhood that I can build relationships with. So it's about relationship building, because what we used to do in the past is different today. And it's different, and it's coming from all sections, and we are learning that it's better for us to work together than to work against each other. Because what's happened in my neighborhood is going to have an impact on Peggy's neighborhood. It's going to have an impact on Jackie's neighborhood. And we work together to try to just make our community a better place to live.
I want to add to what Cheryl said. I want to say that I would encourage people to be actively engaged civically. First of all, all of us should somehow be involved in their community. I don't care if you're volunteering for Little League or whatever, you need to be engaged. We all have that responsibility to take on some sort of involvement in our communities to make them a better and healthier place. I always tell young people, I say, if there's a community meeting, go. Even if you don't utter a word, because guess what? They're looking to see how many bodies are there. They're looking to see who's paying attention. They're looking to see if they have to be, accountable. So show up to your community meetings, get involved. Also, in terms of the environment, the Southeast Environmental Task Force is working on a phone app to make it easier for our residents to report environmental violations. So we're working on that because the normal route was to call 311, and people would call 311 and be on hold for 15 minutes before they could even talk to an operator. So our phone app is going to make it possible, hopefully, for people to be able to report what they see right when they see it. Everybody uses a cell phone, right? So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for citizens to be engaged and to try and work to protect their community. So those are some of the ideas that we try to encourage people to consider when we talk about safety, improvements, quality of life. Be involved, get engaged with what's going on.
I also encourage the community engagement and working together, because obviously everyone has amazing resources themselves, and we just learn from one another, which I appreciate. I'm always learning, and I always appreciate learning. I'm always learning from other folks, and like what I always appreciate is even certain styles of like teaching. I love people who share their stories. That's like the one way that I have learned a lot. I remember it easier in that way. Um, but I just think about how sometimes, like, I know it could get scary sometimes when you think about the environment, like all these things happening, but also there's like a lot of beauty to that. Like I'm just so grateful that many of these community based organizations, they're basically family, and they'll take you in and they'll answer your questions in a truthful manner, because many of us are thinking about like our families, and I think about community members as part of my family to an extent, right? Because I just want everyone to be healthy. I want everyone to get the best out of their neighborhoods. And also just reminding myself how I would want my mom to have all the information for her available. Just as like I would want someone else to have this like information.
Thank you. So we do have some time for a few questions. There's a question in the chat that reads, has there been any effort by community groups or the city to hold the companies who polluted accountable for cleaning up the pollution?
I can answer that one, Chloe. It's very difficult for communities to hold companies accountable. It's very hard for communities to have that kind of power. It's really up to the agencies that are in place to protect us. And unfortunately, some of the regulations that exist are very lenient. We have many, like I said, acres of brownfields where companies either get up and just walk away, and they get away with doing so, or they claim bankruptcy. I mean, companies and corporations have ways around things. We don't have the legal power to go after them that it would take. So once again, it's up to our leaders. It's up to, I believe, the agencies and regulations to try and make sure that this doesn't continue to happen.
Well, based on my experience with being with PCR for 36 years, I've seen how public pressure can force a company to close also. We used to have chem waste, PCB incinerator in our area. And it was the ability of all the neighborhoods from 95th Street all the way back to all Gilgard unified and create a coalition called Citizens United to Claim the Environment. Along with Greenpeace International, they was able to pressure the state to revoke chem waste incinerator, PCB incinerator permits because of the several violations that had occurred in that area. You'll have to remember that right there on 103rd and Doty Road, between Doty Road and Stony Alley, the city of Chicago used to operate 3 municipal incinerators. It was from the community pressure that forced the city, that forced the United States Environmental Protection Agency to cite the city, and the city decided to dismantle those incinerators. We are fortunately that the incinerators that was in Southeast Chicago is no longer there, but there's still a move to, they don't call it incinerator for the life of me, I can't say the word, what they call it, bio something. It's just nothing but a new terminology to say incineration for being proposed to many communities around the country, and particularly probably some here in Illinois. So what, in the experience that we're having today, is really challenging for organizations, for community residents to get an industry closed than what it was in the past. Take, for example, General Ryan, Peggy. They had several violations before they even closed, and they still gave them 2 of the 3 permits that they allowed to, so they can fully operate. Then this was just this past September that they had an explosion there. We had in Little Village, the explosion that happened at the Hillco site, right? So these things, it just seemed like the government is not being accountable, and they don't have the language in the permitting processes that is inclusive of violations can somehow deem you to be non-compliance, to take away their certifications, so it's almost like it's politics. And we should never have to pay politics with our quality of of life, of living. Because I tell people all the time, one of the things I'm very clear about, and I'm sure everybody that's here on this Zoom meeting, pollution don't go to heaven, y'all. Whatever goes up must come down. So all the emission, all the disposal, everything we're doing is coming back to haunt us. Look what we experienced with the climate change today. I mean, it snowed in Houston, Texas. Snowed. Now, if that's not a climatic change, then I don't know what it is, but it is affecting our quality of life. Things are shifting, and it's all based on our own personal consumerism and politics, and that has to change.
I think though, Cheryl, the question was, how do we make them accountable for cleaning up? Companies for cleaning
That's what
up.
I'm saying. It's difficult today than what it was in the past.
Mm-hmm.
It's more difficult. It was easily done when you dismantle, because the city eventually had to clean it up, but they cleaned it up to a standard where they made it a pond. When you go pick up your car, where they pound your car at.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. Right. So what I was just saying from a historical perspective, we accomplished, but today cleanup and stuff is not just to happen at the rate that it should be happening.
I mean, to even clarify more, we have 2 Superfund sites currently on the southeast side in the 10th ward where I live. One site has been in the process of remediation for 12 years. 12 years. They've been trying to clean up the site because it was so hard trying to track down who was responsible. Did they have the funds to do the cleanup? I mean, it's a long legal fight, and it's sad to say, and that Superfund site still is not cleaned up to this day. The cluster sites, Cheryl, you're familiar with them?
It's declared as a state Superfund site because Chicago is ineligible for Superfund assistance from the federal level, which got millions and millions of dollars in its coffers to do renovation in that neighborhood. But because one of the criteria is that a source of drinking water must become contaminated and our water's been filtered. But I just hope that there be some reauthorization with the Superfund to have other, qualifying elements. Qualifying elements to be able to qualify for Superfund funding from a federal standard, because they got millions and millions of dollars in that, and it's not been heavily utilized because Chicago, one of the reasons.
So it's just a very difficult thing to do. It really is.
The state don't have no money to be able to clean it up. So that's what they said.
Right. But it's just very hard to hold industries accountable for whatever reason. It just seems like it is.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. A patron in the chat says, do you have a vision of what environmental justice would look like in your communities and throughout Chicago?
Well, I could start to answer that question. As a task force, we came up with our own environmental justice development principles. We also came up with a set of development guidelines. We gave them to our leadership. The leadership passed them on to the city of Chicago, and nothing ever came of it. And so what we do know is environmental justice does not look like what's going on currently. If you take a company that isn't wanted on the north side, that's a polluter, that the residents complain about, and you decide to move it to the south side, that's not environmental justice. So what would it look like in the city of Chicago? I think community would have more of a voice of what type of development comes in and is acceptable. I mean, that's the first and foremost thing. Right now, the city of Chicago is making decisions about permits. And even though we submit comments, we feel like they're looked at and then they're just kind of put aside because they've already decided yay or nay. And we have community meetings where we make it very clear that we don't want a certain industry to come in, and then guess what? They come in anyway. So environmental justice to me looks like the actual residents and community members would have more of a voice and have more of a decision-making power than they do now about any type of development, or I would say, yeah, commercial, residential, whatever. It has to be the city allowing the community to have a say-so and be able to approve or disapprove of something, and not so much just the city leaders making decisions for us.
And I agree with everything Peggy is saying, but also as a person who grew up in this movement to achieve environmental justice, equal environmental protection for everybody, I can say that I see the growth in this movement, because at one point there was no movement. It was a bunch of criticizing, a bunch of name calling, a bunch of, for lack of a better word, just say a bunch of haters who, regardless, in our government, our elected officials, our policy regulators, they didn't care about how our community has been impacted. I mean, today, a lot of people still trying to understand what is environmental justice. And it's the fight for equal environmental protection, not only for my community, for everybody's community. So I see the growth that now we're having dialogues and conversations about environmental justice. And now we have to take the steps to achieve environmental justice. And that's what Peggy was saying right there, is that we have to have environmental justice policies that are in every regulatory regulations authorities there are, when it comes to housing, when it comes to land use practice, when it comes to siting the industry. Is about, and for our community, it's the restorations of communities that has been disinvested. Because one of the things, look at all the harm that many kids in the city of Chicago has experienced based on just being lead poisoning from living in old equated houses that was built before 1963. When you look at the water quality issues, where some neighborhood have better service line, no lead service lines going adjacent to their houses. But on the other hand, the city of Chicago may be saying, well, we're going to put a lottery together and we may just do 1,000 homes, at no charge. But because you disinvest in these communities, where we didn't have an economic arm in our community, and then we have to be in a lottery, so, but I'm just saying that I see the growth. Now we just got to get to the implementation of these conversations and these things that we see. One of the things that I understand is that in my community, like take for an example, we had PCBs, it's polychlorinated biphenyl, that was deliberately dumped in our community by the Chicago Housing Authority managers. It took us 30 years to clean that up. And it's still, to me, I don't know what the definition is. We don't have a definition as to how clean is clean when it comes to environmental hazards that's been dumped in your neighborhood, for one. But they knew all along that this contaminant was in our community, but never disclosed that stuff to us. We eventually found out about it, and we took action to get the CHA to clean it up. When you talk about lead poisoning issues, a lot of people not having this conversation about the community of Robert Taylor's is because they knew that 48% of those kids in raw potato was lead poison. So they did the transformation plan to demolish those, and those kids went everywhere. And then you see the behavioral problems that you see today, because the kids was drinking lead. I mean, their water was contaminated in their school. Some schools, some kids can't even drink the water because it got lead hazards in it, environmental lead hazards in it. We're doing this to a society of people, and that must change. And that's why it's still going to be called environmental racism, because of the response of our government is different based on class and race.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the call to action there. Unfortunately, we are out of time right now. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank our panelists for their time and expertise. And I also want to thank my coworkers for their help behind the scenes. For more information about Chicago Public Library's virtual programs or our current exhibits, please visit chipublib.org. And thank you, Jackie, Peggy, and Cheryl, so much for joining us this evening.
Chloe, can I just say to anyone that didn't get their questions answered, they can go through Facebook, Southeast Environmental Task Force Facebook page, and I will definitely make every effort to answer any questions that we didn't get to tonight. Okay?
That's so nice. Thank you, Peggy. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and have a wonderful evening.
Bye-bye.